The world's biggest soccer tournament has arrived, and you can trade the entire tournament on Kalshi. On Kalshi, you can trade every match from the opening stage all the way to the final. On Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there's no house. And as the probability changes, you can buy in and out of your position. For a limited time, download the Kalshi app and use code CUP26 to get $10 when you trade 10. Kalshi, Kalshi. Trade the beautiful game. 18 plus only. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory.
The entire summer of soccer is on PrizePicks, all 48 countries in every matchup. And if you rep your side before the round of 16 on PrizePicks, you can win a trip to the finals in New York. It's the biggest tournament ever, which means there's even more opportunities to cash in while you root for your favorite national sides and global soccer stars. Download the app today and use code CUP26 to get $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. Download the app today and use code CUP26 to get $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. PrizePicks, America's #1 sports picks app.
I recently got back from a holiday in Belek in Turkey. It was brilliant, but I did spend it looking longingly at the golf courses in the area. In reality, if I'd taken my clubs, I probably would have come back from that family holiday single. It's a brilliant place, stunning beaches, 5-star hospitality in some of the best hotels on earth, but for me, just getting out on those courses would have been the icing on the cake. Search Turkey on TripAdvisor now to book your ultimate golf holiday in the Turkish Riviera.
Hello and welcome to Haway The Podcast. It's Martin here, and today we've got the great pleasure of welcoming a very special guest to the show because we're joined today by Sunderland's official club historian and a very good friend of the podcast. It's Rob Mason. Good morning, Rob.
Good morning to you and everyone.
And how's the summer going, Rob? Enjoying the World Cup?
I have been enjoying the World Cup actually. From all points of view, it's been a good look. When I say it's been a good tournament, we're all aware of the downsides. We're all aware of Mr. Infantino and the fact that there was a time when we thought, the football world thought, wouldn't it be great to get rid of Sepp Blatter? And now you think, what on earth is going on with, you don't need me to go through the list of, the charge list. All the things that people say are wrong with the World Cup, I wouldn't argue. Having said that, I have enjoyed it. I have enjoyed seeing how a lot of teams have done. I have enjoyed seeing some of the big teams go out, which has made it all the more interesting. And most of all, I've enjoyed seeing the Sunderland players setting record after record from a club point of view about our involvement within the World Cup.
Yeah, the Infantino stuff's very much a case of be careful what you wish for, isn't it? But
absolutely.
But no, it's been fantastic to see so many Sunderland players and even so many mentions of Sunderland on the TV. In relation to the commentary and all that sort of stuff. And you just think back to the last World Cup. I think, wasn't it only Jefferson Bennett that was a Sunderland player in the last
probably right.
World Cup?
I think you're probably right. Certainly at that time we were down on our heels, weren't we? And I think everybody, possibly including yourself, Martin, if you've been listening to the BBC commentary, I think everybody's probably heard Guy Mowbray winding Alan Shearer up about the Sunderland players' involvement, which was great. No surprise coming from Guy. But while I was over in Vancouver, I met up with Kevin Kilban and Steve Caldwell, who are the two big names on Canadian TV when it comes to football coverage. They work for a company called TSN, which is a national broadcaster, and normally they're based in Toronto. But as they were in Vancouver and I was in Vancouver for the invest in Vancouver just for the World Cup, I went down to meet them at the TV studio they had overlooking Vancouver Harbour, beautiful setting with the seaplanes landing behind them and so on. And after saying hello, the first thing Kevin said to me was, Rob, I've mentioned Sunderland about 12 times today already. It's not just in our UK coverage that Sunderland have been getting a lot of mentions, because after all, we've had so many players involved and so many players scored. It's been excellent.
It has. The one that stuck out for me was on the Australian TV coverage. It was one of the Dutch games in which Brian Brobby was playing. And the commentator said, and of course, Brian Brobby got his big move from Ajax to Sunderland last summer.
Yeah, that's a nice line. Yeah,
I'll take that.
Yeah.
I'll have that one. I'm quite happy with that one.
Indeed.
As well as Rob being with us today, we've got another Sunderland history buff on the show. We've got our very own Andrew Smithson joining us today. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, mate. I've not played for Sunderland quite as many times as Kevin Kilban, sadly. But, I've still not given up hope.
But you mentioned Sunderland a lot more times per day than Kevin Kilban does, so there's levels to that, isn't there?
Yeah, 12 times a day is nothing. Somebody will be saying, "Are you all right, Andrew? What's going on? You've not mentioned Sunderland nearly as much."
You're a bit quiet today, Andrew. So, look, we've got a few things to get stuck into today. And, Rob, we haven't caught up with you for a little while. And I'm still very keen to talk as much as we can about last season. But from a history perspective, and from just being a supporter, last season was pretty spectacular, really, wasn't it, all things told?
It was spectacular. When we were travelling back from the playoff final, I don't think anybody, even the most optimistic and ardent Sunderland supporter, expected us to do anywhere near as well, or to sign as many players, or to sign as many good players. The day after the playoff final, I went to see Tottenham play Brighton and Hove Albion because I'd not been to Tottenham's new ground. It just so happened that Simon Adingra was playing for Brighton, so it was quite nice when we signed him to think, I've just seen him, I've got an idea of what he's like. But the difference in standard, having been at Wembley one day and seen us beat Sheffield United with all that entailed, and then 24 hours later being at Tottenham and watching a Premier League game, and I thought, you know what struck me? It struck me that I thought the game was much slower than what I'd been used to in the Championship. But when it burst from being, this particular game, when it burst from being slow to being fast, it was electric fast. And I thought, we're going to struggle to live with some of these players. And then, obviously, we signed players. I was very optimistic at the start of the season. At the start of last season, I was invited to a do at the fire station where there was people from various podcasts. I was on first with Frankie Francis and Danny Collins.
Yeah.
And there was people from various podcasts. And then the big act in the second half, as it like, was Kevin Phillips. And I remember on stage that night, Frankie asking the audience who would settle for 17th place. And the place was sold out. And I think just about every hand went up except mine. And I was of the opinion, I says, no, I'm looking to finish halfway up. And everybody thought I was daft. But by then I was quite confident we'd finish. I didn't think we'd finish 7th. But I was thinking we might finish 10th, 11th, 12th.
Yeah.
And my attitude at the time was, look, if you aim to finish 17th, you've got no wriggle room. If you finish a position or two lower than you are, you're going down. You've got to set your sights a bit higher than that. And also, by this time, the fixtures were out. And I was saying, look, I know there's no easy fixtures, but for goodness sake, you've got West Ham at home in the first game. Firstly, you want a home game. And secondly, you want a beatable team. And if there's a beatable team, it's West Ham. I says, we can beat them. I said, second game is away to Burnley. We took 4 points off Burnley last season and we should have taken 6. The season before, as it were. That was the season of the two saved Wilson Isidore penalties. And after that, we had Brentford at home. Now, I know Brentford went on to have a really good season. But Brentford at the time, you were looking and thinking they've lost their manager, they've lost most of their best players. I thought there was no reason why Sunderland couldn't win their first 3 games, be top of the league after 3, and then have that momentum. Now, we didn't quite get that because we lost at Burnley. We should have won, I think, if Mayendra had stuck his early chance away.
Yeah,
we probably would have gone on to win that game. But nonetheless, we still did get off to a good start, and that good start was just, I thought, invaluable in terms of building belief in the crowd, building belief in the players, and of course, from then we went from strength to strength. So it turned out last season. I mean, look, I've been going to see Sunderland. Last season was the 60th season I've been watching Sunderland, and it equalled the best ever league finish we've had. Obviously, I was there for the 2 Peter Reid 7th finishes. So in the 60 seasons I've watched Sunderland, in terms of league position, it was as good as any. And the feel-good factor, of course, amongst the support, the way things went, yes, it was an absolutely stellar season, but it's gone now. It's absolutely gone now. It's another page for the history books now. We're still enjoying it, and so we should. But the real business starts when we've got a trip to newly promoted Ipswich Town, and we've got to do it all again with the added excitement, but also the added demands of at minimum of 8 European games.
The feel-good factor from the end of the season, and it has continued to a large extent. Obviously, there hasn't been any arrivals so far, which maybe people might have been expecting. But we've obviously managed to bat off Chelsea's interest in Granit Xhaka, haven't we? We've seen development on Legends Way take place. We've seen the Monty strips, which I think are a brilliant nod to Jimmy Montgomery and all of his achievements at the club and all that sort of stuff. So that feel-good factor's continued to a large extent throughout the course of the summer.
The World Cup's been a big part of that, because people have continued, as we've just been talking about, Martin, people have continued to see our players and see our players doing well and see our players be lauded through the media. So yes, that feel-good factor is still there, and hopefully it will continue to ride the crest of that particular wave for some time to come. But as we all know, if we go to Ipswich and get beat off Fulham, that feel-good factor will have completely vanished. So we've got to now, as I just sort of intimated, we've got to now think, right, come on, new season starting, players are in pre-season training, first game's a long way off, but we've got to approach it, as I'm absolutely 100% certain the powers that be at the football club and the coaching staff will be doing. You know, it's a blank page now. We've got to go and do it all again. Teams who've been at the top for years and years and years don't fall away by not being professional, and we've got to be professional. And if we're going to maintain the standards that we've set, we've got to go about it the right way and not just pat ourselves on the back and think, aren't we great?
No, that's absolutely right. And Andrew, it's an interesting thing I was reading. I think it was Mikel Arteta was talking about the team selection issues he's going to have early next season. And, you know, the chances are he's going to have to rotate a lot of the players who've been involved in the World Cup in the early stages of the season. And given that we've had so many players, you know, you've seen all of the charts, haven't you, in terms of which clubs sent the most players to the World Cup, and we're right up there. So that's going to be another thing for Regis Le Bris to be considering and contemplating now, isn't it? Especially as Rob's talked about with the European games to chuck into the mix too.
Yeah, it's another challenge, but whenever the team faces a challenge, Le Bris seems to be able to deal with it. There's always a plan put in place. We've never looked at Sunderland last year and thought we've been caught short there or we've been outmanoeuvred. I think the club will prepare on the basis that some of the players have had long summers. Very possible that some of the signings we bring in the next couple of weeks, one or two of them might have been involved in the World Cup. Or like Jocelyn, his season was extended because he was playing in a youth tournament. But the club has switched on to that type of thing. They'll know it's an issue and plan accordingly. We've seen over the last couple of days they've brought in Jose Font to the coaching team, and that might be with a view to giving more support to the players. I think the backroom staff are going to have a big part to play. Certainly people who are experts in recovery and nutrition and what have you, they're going to have to be switched on. Obviously, I take Arteta's point. I mean, he's just won the Premier League. I wondered if the first few weeks the players would be okay. Because they've been training so much, so they'll still retain an element of match sharpness. I'm a little bit concerned as to when we get to the autumn time. I wonder if that's when we've got past the initial excitement of the start of the season. I suspect we might see one or two players then when we're in a bit of a cycle of 2 games a week. You might see a couple of the players looking leggy then. That just proves Rob's point about needing a good start. You know, if we start well, we can perhaps deal with any lags better. But I wouldn't be surprised if around that time we see there being a few changes in the team, or maybe 1 or 2 players having a reduced workload in training, things like that. I know there's a couple of international breaks coming up, and I don't know. I wonder if 1 or 2 might pick up a thigh strain just before the international break and need a couple of weeks off, things like that. So it's going to be a factor. Tiredness is going to be a factor, but the way football is now, Sunderland are right at the forefront of understanding the science side of it, and I think we'll do all we can to negotiate with that.
It's going to be interesting, certainly, to watch how it all unfolds. And Rob, as you mentioned, we've got European football to chuck into the mix this season as well.
Mhm.
And obviously, in Sunderland's history, we haven't played football in Europe since '73. We played 4 European ties. We're going to get 8 at the minimum this season.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's a whole new chapter. It's uncharted territory, really, for many people, isn't it?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I saw the European Cup Winners' Cup home games against Vasas and Sporting Lisbon in 1973. I didn't see the away games. I was at school. I certainly didn't have the money or the permission from my mum to miss days off school and find money I didn't have to go to the away games. But I remember the home games. And yes, I mean, it's, we've been close to Europe on 2 or 3 occasions since. I think everybody in particular remembers the 2004 FA Cup when we lost to Millwall in the semi-final, knowing that if you won that, even if you lost the FA Cup final, you were almost certainly going to be in Europe, because the other semi-final was between 2 teams destined for the Champions League, and that's indeed what happened to Millwall.
Yeah.
And of course, there was the 2 7th place finishes under Reedy, where your 7th place didn't get you a European spot in those days, unlike now. So we have been close, but we're finally there. And we have to look forward to it. We have to relish it. We have to enjoy it. But also, people talk about the second season syndrome back in the Premier League, and we're going to have to cope with that. And we're going to have to cope with that with those minimum extra 8 games. And I agree with what Andrew said, that once we get into, past the first burst of the season, if you like, players who've been involved in the World Cup, and let's face it, they haven't all been involved in the World Cup. The likes of Enzo Lefebvre and Nordi Mukulele and so on have all had a proper close season rest. But a substantial number of important players have clearly been involved, and will continue to be involved in the international games. They won't necessarily get those breaks, though. I did hear what Andrew said about 1 or 2 might have convenient thigh strains. Who knows? But yeah, it is going to be demanding, but we've got to relish it. We've got to relish it. We've got to make the most of it. And if at times things don't go well, we need supporters to understand that we're watching human beings. We're not watching a PlayStation game where people don't necessarily get tired, or get worn out with the number of games they've played over a 12-month period. And there will have to be a bigger strength in depth in the squad than perhaps we've had. And there will have to be more rotation. And I expect to see some of that rotation in some of the European games, depending, of course, on the strength of the opposition.
Indeed. Well, that's a really, really good point to take a very short break. And after we come back, we're going to be talking all about managers. We'll be back after a couple of ads.
The world's biggest soccer tournament has arrived, and you can trade the entire tournament on Kalshi. On Kalshi, you can trade every match from the opening stage all the way to the final. On Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there's no house. And as the probability changes, you can buy in and out of your position. For a limited time, download the Kalshi app and use code CUP26 to get $10 when you trade 10. KALSHI Kalshi. Trade the beautiful game. 18 plus only. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory.
The entire summer of soccer is on PrizePicks, all 48 countries in every matchup. And if you rep your side before the round of 16 on PrizePicks, you can win a trip to the finals in New York. It's the biggest tournament ever, which means there's even more opportunities to cash in while you root for your favorite national sides and global soccer stars. Download the app today and use code CUP26 to get $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. Download the app today and use code CUP26 to get $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. PrizePicks, America's #1 sports picks app.
Welcome back to Haway The Podcast. I've got Rob Mason, the club's historian, and Andrew Smithson with us today. And one of the reasons we want to get you on the podcast today, Rob, is to talk about your new book. It's called Gaffers.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us, what was the motivation behind that concept, first of all?
Well, there was 2, Martin, really. One is, when I finished my last book, which was a big effort, I thought, right, I've written a lot of books now. I think that's it. I'm putting my feet up. I'm not going to write any more books. other than the club annual that I do every year. And that was my intention. But last autumn, I got a bit bored in the dark winter nights, and I thought, you know what, I really would need to do something. That was half of it. The other half was 2 or 3 years ago, I brought out a book called The Absolute Record, The Players, which was an A to Z of every player. I was aware that back in around about the year 2000, we had the book All the Lads, which I contributed to but didn't write, which was an excellent book. But since then, quarter of a century on, we'd come to learn there was quite, with this is no criticism whatsoever of Garth Dykes and Doug Lamming, who did a fantastic job with the All the Lads book. But as you would expect, over a quarter of a century, some new information had come to light about the players they wrote about. We knew that a fair bit of the factual information in there was incorrect, birthplaces, all that sort of stuff. Plus, there was about 330 at the time I wrote the book. There was about 330 players that had played first-team football for Sunderland since All the Lads came out. But so that was a huge, huge book. But when I started writing it, my intention was to do all of the players and all of the managers in that book. But me being me, I tend to write too much. And as it was progressing, I realised that there was not going to be room to do the managers in the book. So that book just turned out to just be the players. So I'd never done a book on all of the managers.
Yeah.
And I've known so many of the managers. I worked out that I've met and interviewed 44 of the people who've managed Sunderland. So I've got a lot of personal experience with Sunderland managers. And that's including caretakers. And so I thought, I'll do a book on every manager to manage Sunderland. And we call it the Gaffers because, of course, these days you tend to find they're often not the manager either, they're the head coach. And if you go back to the early years of football, they weren't the manager either, they were the secretary, as I've tried to explain in the introduction. But I've done it. This book is not one where I've written too much. This book is quite a short book. It's only 120 pages. It's pocket-sized. The company I work with had a very specific, how can I put it? A very specific instruction for me that basically we've given either 1, 2, 3, or maximum 4 pages per manager.
Right.
And I was given a set number of words I had to stick to, depending on whether that manager was getting 1, 2, 3, or 4 pages. So that really sort of limited me in terms of having to discipline myself and thinking, no, I can't go in with all this extra detail that I'm interested in, but other people aren't necessarily. So it's an at-a-glance guide. It's a simple guide to every manager that we've ever had, including caretakers. And I've got to say at this point that, as is usually the case, I'm indebted to the other person on the podcast, in Andrew, because whenever I'm writing a book, Andrew's very kind and such a good friend of mine that I always send what I'm writing to Andrew while I'm writing it to say, what do you think of this? And if I've made a mistake, which is often the case as I get older, Andrew will pick me up on it. And I may or may not pick those mistakes up myself in any case without Andrew when I was proofreading. But Andrew's brilliant at sort of helping out with that. So I've got to sort of pay due credit to Andrew for all of his help on this book and indeed a lot of the other books that I've done.
Hey, you Andrew, that's a pretty good accolade, isn't it, mate?
Well, it's totally accurate accolade. Andrew's a massive help to me.
I've said before, I don't take praise very well, but thank you. And I mean, Rob, I say every single time, I'd be reading these books anyway. I might as well do it before it goes to print. So
well, if anybody spots any mistakes in the book, by the way, they're entirely my fault, entirely my responsibility. All I can say is, if you spot any mistakes in the book, there would be a lot more if it wasn't for Andrew's input in the first place.
There we go. And Andrew, I did notice you got a mention on the back cover, which is very nice, isn't it? But when you look back at the managers that we've had, and Andrew, we've talked about them with Kelvin often, haven't we, on the On This Week podcasts and stuff like that. Some of the early managers achieved so much for the football club, didn't they? And as time goes by, it's important that those managers are still talked about and remembered, or if they were secretaries or whatever their official title was. They did so much both for Sunderland and for football in general.
We're all raving about Regis Le Bris at the moment. but there will have been a time when Johnny Cochran was the man of the moment, or whoever, and everybody will have been talking about him then and loving the work he did. So it's fantastic we recognise him. What I like about the book as well is the people who maybe were just caretakers and did literally one game.
Yeah.
You know me, Martin, whenever I'm talking about the history of Sunderland, just anybody connected with the club fascinates me. So it's good that we remember somebody like Tom Watson, but there's others in there who maybe long-term fans have never heard of before. And I like that they get their little moment in the sun as well.
A point I made in the book is that if you exclude the people who are caretakers, 4 of the first 5 Sunderland managers won the league.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it, when you look back on that. That was over such a long period of time, of course.
Absolutely. The Sunderland, again, excluding caretakers, Sunderland had only had 7 managers when I started going to the match. Only ever had 7.
It's so incredible, isn't it? When you look at the lifespan of managers typically now, they're probably somebody who's 10 or 12 years old and has seen 7 managers.
Oh, absolutely.
Sunderland, wouldn't they?
Absolutely. I mean, I used to joke with some of the managers that came into Sunderland, particularly Roy Keane, because I thought when Roy Keane came, I thought I thought wrongly, I'm often wrong. I thought Roy Keane was going to be Sunderland's Bill Shankly or Matt Busby. I thought Roy Keane would be there for years when he came in.
Yeah.
Because this was before the economy, the Irish economy dropped, and the Drummondville Consortium, who were backing him financially, lost all their money and needed to sell up, and things went badly at the club. But I thought Roy would be there for years, and I thought he would continue and have a massive success. And I joked with Roy, which is something you should never do. It was an own goal. I joked with Roy that he could get his name put on the manager's door now with a proper sign as opposed to in chalk, because normally it was only in chalk because it was changed so often. And he laughed initially, and then I got the stare.
In terms of the managers who have been in charge of Sunderland, Rob, that you've met, you said before that you've met 44 of them or interviewed 44 of them.
Yeah. Including caretakers.
Including caretakers. Are there characteristics that the successful ones share? Or is it more nuanced than that? What have you observed?
No, that's a very good question, Martin. Characteristics that they share. I would think the one that springs to my mind is inner self-belief in themselves.
Yeah.
Total confidence in themselves. And that confidence then transfers, if you like, exudes to the players and to the people around them. So while he was only here for a short time, and you could only measure his success in the fact that he managed to achieve one of our many escapes from relegation, one person that comes to mind is Dick Advocat, who was one of my personal favourite managers, a really lovely man. Now, bear with me on this. Dick Advocat always used to introduce me to people, and he would always say, "This is Rob. He's a magnificent writer." Now, I have no claims to being a magnificent writer. I accept prolific, but magnificence maybe is overdoing it. However, when the manager introduces you to people and says you're magnificent, you grow a couple of inches, and you feel that much better in yourself. And I used to go home and I used to think, if he's like that with me, what's he like with the players? And then when he first came, this is before that, when he first came in early on, I can't remember if it was his first home game or not, but we got thumped about 4-0 at home. One of his early games. Palace, I think it was Palace, yeah. And in the press room afterwards, I remember him being asked in the press conference by somebody, do you think Sunderland can come up? Sunderland can stay up? After they just got thumped 4-0 at home. And he just looked at them as if they were daft. And he said, yes, of course. And they said, what possibly gives you any reason to think Sunderland can stay up after that performance? And he just shrugged his shoulders and said, because I am here. And you know what? We didn't lose another game until after we were mathematically safe.
Yeah.
That was Dick Advocat. That was that inner self-belief. Reedy had it. Roy Keane had it. Big Sam had it. All the managers who were good man managers were people, Let's just say David Moyes didn't have it.
You won't find any arguments between me and Andrew on that score, will you, Andrew?
Yeah. Or at least let's be fair. Let's be fair and say if David Moyes did have it, he didn't show it. I never saw it. He must have some self-belief in himself. He must have a lot after all he's achieved in the game. But clearly, all he's achieved at the game was away from Sunderland. It wasn't at Sunderland.
It was.
If it was me writing this book, Rob, called The Gaffers, I would have been tempted to do a Len Shackleton when we turned to the David Moyes pages and said, what is David Moyes' successes at Sunderland?
Well,
And
look,
then
David
just
Moyes,
page
we're
empty.
talking about some of the great managers of Sunderland. If we were talking about the other side of the coin, you look at David Moyes and you look at Laurie McMenemy. Both David Moyes and Laurie McMenemy have had very, very good careers elsewhere. Laurie McMenemy in particular as a manager.
Yeah.
He won the league, I think. I mean, people think of Laurie McMenemy because of his time at Southampton, but they forget, he won the league with the other teams he managed, lower down the food chain, the likes of Doncaster Rovers and so on. There's about 3 different teams he won leagues with, and then won the FA Cup with Southampton as a second division side, got Southampton to be runners-up in what is now the Premier League, their best ever league position. And then, of course, it did not work for him at Sunderland. Similarly, for David Moyes, I know he didn't have a great time at Real Sociedad or at Manchester United, but he's done well over the years at Everton, at West Ham, and at Preston. But at Sunderland, of course, it was a totally different kettle of fish, wasn't it?
It certainly was, unfortunately. And
Mm-hmm.
Rob, when you look back at all of the managers, obviously with the work that you've done for this book, is there one that stands out as maybe having an unfair reputation among Sunderland supporters? Maybe somebody who isn't.
Yeah, the name that comes to
credit.
mind there is the name that comes immediately to my mind there is Steve Bruce. I always stick up for Steve Bruce. I know I'm well aware that in the fan base there is a lot of antipathy towards Steve Bruce. I think some of the things he said. I mean, people go on about him being a boyhood Newcastle supporter. There's nothing wrong with being a boyhood Newcastle supporter. If that's where you're from, and although he wasn't from Newcastle, he was one of 3 Sunderland managers born in Corbridge, but grew up in Newcastle. That was his team, but he came to Sunderland. I remember the day he was appointed. I was up in his office in Black Cat House, and I pointed out to him the Stokoe statue, which you could see from his office.
Yeah.
Because Steve was already talking to me, it wasn't my first meeting with him, it was my first meeting with him since he became Sunderland manager. And he was talking, he was asking me, he says, do you think people will accept me because of my Newcastle background? Not that was particularly strong, by the way, not as strong as people make out. And I just pointed to the Stokoe statue. And I said, see that statue there, Steve? I said, that's a bloke who won the FA Cup with Newcastle. There's a statue of him at Sunderland, he won the FA Cup with Sunderland as well. And then Steve, we got, he got pelters. We got beat 5-1 at Newcastle when he was manager. And 3 things stick in my mind about that game. One is Sunderland had a glorious chance at 0-0 that we missed. And if we'd scored, maybe that would have been different. Secondly, if he was such a Newcastle supporter, he could have easily turned up that day in suit and tie, but he didn't. He turned up in a Sunderland tracksuit. Thirdly, when things are going badly, most managers disappear into the technical area and they sit in their seat and you don't see them. Even though the technical area at St James's Park is very, very close to the pitch, Steve Bruce spent the entire game in the technical area, taking all the dog's abuse 50,000 Geordies could give him. And he stood there and took it and faced the music. And then after that, we went on and had a couple of really good results. Most notably, I think 2 games later, we went and won at Chelsea when Chelsea hadn't lost at home for about 1 million years. Yeah. And so in terms of a reaction, the reaction was brilliant. But people don't like Steve Bruce for various reasons. I always, on a personal level, I always found him exceptionally good to work with, an exceptionally nice bloke. When he got the sack, you'll remember we had a game against Wigan Athletic, his former club, and although it was relatively early in the season, a draw wasn't good enough. He was under such pressure, he desperately needed to win. He ended up making substitutions that were desperate substitutions. He was taking defenders off to put forwards on to try and get that win. We got hit on the break in the last couple of minutes and we lost. And he suffered more abuse from the stands than anybody I've seen since Laurie McMenemy. And the following Monday in the academy, in the canteen, he said to me, he says, Rob, he says, you've been here a long time. What have I got to do? And I said, 2 things, Steve. 1, keep your head down and say nothing. And 2, win your next game. But he never got the chance because about 48 hours later, he got the bullet. But I have to say, a very decent man, a very good man. He was excellent in having his hand in transfers. There was one day, it was a pre-season friendly away to Peterborough, and we were negotiating to sign Darren Bent. Now, I know Darren Bent's time ended in disappointment and unsavoury feelings, to put it mildly, but let's not forget, there's only Kevin Phillips scored more goals in his Premier League season for Sunderland than Darren Bent, who was brilliant when he was playing, brilliant in terms of finishing. And on the team bus coming back from Peterborough, we were flying back, but on the team bus flying from Peterborough, from the team bus from Peterborough to whichever airport we were going from, I was sat behind Steve and the chief exec at the time, who was Margaret Byrne. And Margaret was on the phone. This is late at night. This is like 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And Margaret's on the phone to Bent's agent, trying to get him to come. She wasn't getting anywhere. And Steve said, and I was sitting there behind, trying desperately to look like I wasn't listening, but really trying to listen. And Steve said, no, give me the phone. And Steve basically talked the agent into it. And then we had to cut the call because we were getting the plane. When we got off the plane at a private bit of Newcastle Airport, and we're then on the bus going back down to the Academy of Light where everybody had parked the cars. I was again sat next to, by this time it's about 1 o'clock in the morning, and Steve straight on the phone again, trying to continue that. And then very shortly afterwards, Darren did sign for Sunderland. I'm certainly of the opinion, having eavesdropped on some of the conversations that I shouldn't have been doing, that we wouldn't have signed, that we wouldn't have persuaded Darren Bent and his agent to put in their lot with Sunderland if it wasn't for Steve Bruce's personal intervention. So he was, as far as I'm concerned, he gets a bad rap for the supporters he doesn't really deserve. Was he all good? No, of course he wasn't. But he was a decent man. He signed some really good players. If you look at the forwards we had when Steve was manager, we had Fraser Campbell, played for England. We had Asamoah Gyan. We had Darren Bent. I think it was Danny Welbeck there at the same time.
Yeah.
What four cracking forwards to choose from. When you talk about needing to rotate your side and so on, you can never have too many good forwards, I don't think. And so, yeah, Steve Bruce, I think, deserves a better reputation than he's got at Sunderland. And let's not forget, apart from Regis Le Bris and Peter Reid, he's the only manager to give us a top 10 finish in the top flight of English football in 60 years.
He is, indeed. And Rob, when you've been looking back at managers, and obviously I'm sure the vast majority of us come from what's inside your head already, but researching other bits and pieces, is there anything that you've discovered that's kind of changed your perception of a manager that Sunderland have had, or maybe made you think about how you viewed their spell in charge, or something that you learned that you didn't know about before?
I don't think there's anything that's changed my view of anybody. Obviously, everybody from sort of, let me see, Laurie McMenamin's time in the mid-'80s. I've just finished the 40th season of being involved in writing or editing the programme. So I've known all of the managers since Laurie McMenamy, and some of the managers from before that, such as Len Ashurst, I got to know very, very well, but I didn't know them when they were manager, but got to know Len particularly well in later years. So I've known them all, and I've had my own personal opinion. I mean, look, just about every Sunderland manager I've been lucky enough to have a really, really good relationship with. In some cases, became very friendly with them. In some cases, in no shape or form could I be described as a friend of theirs, but had a perfectly acceptable working relationship. Take Gus Poyet, for instance. Gus was very businesslike, very good to work with, was absolutely fine. But I would just go and do my job. Thanks very much, Gus. And off I would go. I wouldn't never develop the relationship before that. Beyond that, no problem with that whatsoever. The only manager I didn't have a good relationship with was David Moyes, and I didn't have a terrible relationship with him. It was just, that was just the way it was. So I've got pretty strong opinions and firm opinions, and generally very, very positive opinions about all of those Sunderland managers I've known, because I do have some understanding of the difficulties it is as being a manager, because you go to the match and there's 40,000 managers in the stand, and everybody thinks their idea would work, but their ideas are never put to the test, and everybody always knows better. So managers have a hard time, but generally I've got a positive view of them, because every manager I've seen has been working their socks off, working all the hours God sends, and doing their level best to do the best job they can with the resources they have available. Doesn't always work, of course, that's football.
And that's the aspect of a manager's role, isn't that? As fans, we don't get to see, we get to see what they put out on the field on a Saturday afternoon or a Tuesday night, but, as you say, it's all of those 1 a.m.
Or a
calls.
Thursday night now, Martin.
Or Thursday night, yes, we've got that to look forward to, and lots of Sundays as well.
Yeah.
But, it's a 1 a.m. phone call to agents. It's sitting in the office until late at night every night and in early. We don't see that, do we? But it's all part of it.
If you take Lee Johnson, there's another manager who I possibly could have mentioned in the same sort of breath as Steve Bruce, somebody who possibly deserves a better reputation than he has. I mean, Lee had a hard time when we went to that game at Bolton where we got thrashed 6-0. I think I'm right in saying that if we'd won that game, we could have gone top of the league. And Lee got the push, obviously after a disastrous result. I always thought the irony with Lee is that Lee was such an articulate man who failed to communicate, because Lee always talked as if he was in a seminar of coaches at St George's Park and couldn't talk in a way that the average Sunderland supporter would really be on the same wavelength as him in terms of what he's talking about. But again, worked very hard. And you talked about late night calls. I remember when Lee was manager, we had a pre-season in Scotland. We were going to play Hearts and the team was staying in a central Edinburgh hotel. And I got asked, would I go? He rang me up and he said, would I come and give a talk to all of the squad and all of the coaching staff about the history of the club as part of their pre-season? So I went across to Edinburgh to the hotel and I thought, this is going to go down like a lead balloon. Pre-season, they'll have all had a double training session. They'll be knackered. They'll just want to go into the hotel room and play on their PlayStations or ring their friends, or ring their wives or whatever. They'll not want to listen to me babble on for an hour. But I went in, I gave the talk, it went really well. The players were all really, really, really interested and very, very good. It couldn't have gone better from my point of view. Anyway, Lee had said afterwards, obviously the players weren't, but the coaching staff were going for a drink on Princess Street afterwards. And he says, will you come with us? I said, yeah. As it happened, after the talk, all of the players, except one, the one was Will Grigg, all of the players lined up at the end to talk to me, every single one, shake my hand and talk to me at the end. And then when I caught up with the staff, because the staff had long since gone by the time I'd finished talking to all the players, and Lee had sent me a little pin drop saying, this is the bar we're in. And I went down, I met them, and I says, thanks very much. I says, you must have put the players up to that. I says, it's very nice, very purposeful to do. To sort of be so polite to me afterwards, because most of them at that time didn't know me because I'd left the club full time. Some of them did. But he said, no, he says they've done that all of their own volition. They were all just genuinely interested, which I thought was really good, because I thought it shows. I mean, we went on to win promotion that season from League One. And I thought, at the beginning of the season, I thought, that shows a togetherness and a belief and an interest and a commitment from the players. But anyway, the point is, at that night, it was about midnight. We're still in this sort of bar in Princess Street, and Lee had to go because he says, I'm trying to sign Alex Pritchard, and he was off at midnight. He had a call which he didn't want to take in the middle of a bar in Princess Street. He was racing back to the hotel to continue negotiations. So again, that just goes to show you that managers, it is a full-time job and then some. So when they get grief, it's not for the want of trying.
Now, Andrew, you and I have done a few Sunderland quizzes over the past year or two, haven't we? And in this book, there's a few brilliant little bits of information I didn't know. I think would make fantastic quiz questions, and we might give a hint to one or two. I don't want to give away the answer to one of them because I think it's fantastic. But what were some of the things in the book that really caught your eye, first of all, in terms of maybe things that you didn't know, or things that you were a little bit surprised about?
And actually, this is a nice little plug. I did a book review that was published on the website on the 12th of July. The story of a caretaker secretary called Alex Watson who didn't actually manage any games, but he had about 3 months in charge, Martin. He died rather sadly in church, in St. Andrew's Church in Roker. And the reason that story stood out to me is my dad is one of the vicars there. So I was very pleased to talk to my dad a couple of days ago and say, "Oh, well, Dad, St. Andrew's, blah, blah, blah." And bless him, he humoured me. But it was the first time in a while I was able to talk to my dad about the church and have a bit of a story. Alex Watson had retired from football by that point, but he was a member of the choir. He'd lived in Roker for a long time, and he fell unwell just before a service. And Rob mentions that in the Gaffers, so that piqued my interest. And I like that.
Yeah.
Quite gruesome, unfortunately, that he passed away.
One of those
personally,
one of those quirky, funny little odd facts, isn't it? You know, the Sunderland manager who died in a church, and in a church at Roker, just around the corner from Roker Park, of course.
Yeah.
He was caretaker manager through the summer of 1899. As Andrew says, he didn't actually oversee a game, but he sort of held the reins, as it were, during that particular summer. Before they appointed Alex Mackey, and following the reign of Bob Campbell, who was the half brother of Johnny Campbell, the star striker of the 1890s.
Yeah, brilliant.
That's actually another good one, Martin. Sorry, just in more recent times, we've had a lot of assistants take charge of one game. So, like Martin Canning, for what have you. Now, I could rattle off every stat from the 90s, but in more recent years, it's hard to keep a track of all those, those names who maybe were just worked alongside Jack Ross or worked alongside a manager who wasn't here that long.
Yeah.
I can very well see me in months to come quickly dipping into the book to just remember, what was the name of that lad from Middlesbrough who took one football league trophy game or something like that.
Yeah,
no, that's right.
Yeah, that's a fair point, Andrew. I mean, the bit on the it would have been easy to just do this book just on the people who've been, if you like, the proper managers or the proper head coaches, and not include the caretakers. But we've had so many caretakers, I thought it would be good to include them. And sometimes you get people who I think people will look through and think, "Oh, really? Did he manage Sunderland? Who was he?" So if I take one example, for instance, if you take Billy McKinley, who took one game in sort of 2017 jointly with Robbie Stockdale. But we're recording this in the middle of the World Cup, and Billy McKinley did play in the World Cup for Scotland against Brazil, a million years ago. So he's got his own background, his own sort of history, long history in the game. But his time at Sunderland is just a mere small footnote in his personal biography and also in the history of Sunderland Football Club. But these people deserve to be recorded and remembered.
Well, Rob, you've done it now. That was the one thing I wanted to keep away from people, to give them an extra incentive. That was my plug for your book. I was going to say,
sorry,
because it's a great question, right? So, in the book it says there's 5 Sunderland managers to play in the World Cup.
Yeah,
and I think everybody who scratches their head will be able to go Terry Butcher, Peter Reid, Roy Keane, Mick McCarthy, but the 5th one would have had them stumped for ages, wouldn't it? But there you go.
Edit that bit out, Martin.
And of course, there's keeping with the World Cup theme, there's 2 managers, and we've mentioned them already, who've managed at the World Cup as well, isn't it? Dick Advocaat and Mick McCarthy as well. But if you go to our current manager, I was just thinking about this earlier, because Regis Le Bris is about to start his 3rd pre-season with Sunderland, and it's a shame that not many managers in recent history have had that opportunity. I think, by my reckoning, Steve Bruce is probably the last one to get to his 3rd pre-season, and probably Roy Keane, Peter Reid before that, wouldn't it?
And again, it's indicative of the fact, look, over the years, Sunderland have many times we've appointed a real big name manager thinking that was an automatic ticket to success. we've already talked about Laurie McMenemy here. Now, when Laurie McMenemy was appointed, everybody was not just pleased. I remember we're delighted. I was teaching at Oxclose School at the time. And when news came in that Laurie McMenemy was appointed as manager, myself and several of the other teachers who were big Sunderland supporters, I remember the news was going around the staff like wildfire. Everybody thought it was absolutely brilliant. And of course, it was a disaster. In comparison, when Regis Le Bris was appointed, I've yet to meet anybody who can honestly say to me, yes, I never heard of him before. I'd never heard of him before.
No.
When he came in. And yet, he got off to such a good start in his first season. We were never lower than 4th that season, went on to win the playoffs. He got a bit of flack because we lost the last 5 games of that season, but we were already assured of our place in the Premier League, of our place in the playoffs, rather. And if you remember, Regis at the time was saying to the press, he was saying, look, I've never been involved in the playoffs before, anywhere. But I've been looking at, typical Regis, I've been researching what teams are doing when they go into the playoffs. And so he rested players. And yes, we lost games we shouldn't have lost at the end of last season, but so what? What did it matter? We were already guaranteed to finish 4th. And we went on and then had the stamina to come back from a goal down, quarter of an hour from time, to come back and beat Sheffield United in the final. That's after the battles that we had with Coventry that, of course, went to extra time, and that sensational last minute of extra time goal from Dan Ballard. The players had it in them. They hadn't been worn out playing in 5 meaningless games at the end of the season, but he took a bit of flack for that. And then at the start of last season again, of course, when so many players were brought in, I think it's to the immense credit of Regis Le Bris and his coaching staff that we started last season looking like a team and not looking like a set of individuals that had never met each other before. Yeah. He'd been working them and getting them to work as a structured unit. It was to his benefit, of course, that we got so many players in very early, though they didn't all come in so early, but he did get a lot in early on, and he really had them organised and worked as a team from moment one. My opinion of Regis Le Bris is I think he's a genius. Nobody gets everything right all the time, but you look at what that guy does, how he changes things within games. Does he get it right every time? Of course not. He's a human being. But by gum, I think he's done an absolutely wonderful job in the 2 years he's been at Sunderland.
I don't think you'll find much disagreement with that.
I hope not.
Absolutely not. No, I think we continually talk, don't we, Andrew, about how good a job Le Bris has done, and he must be up there in terms of most success. Well, whether it's statistically the most successful or just in terms of the impact he's had, he's got to be up there, hasn't he?
The impact he's had in terms of game, brilliant. Go on, Andrew.
I was just going to say, Rob, you underlined it earlier when you said in the 60 years of you watching Sunderland play, his second season in charge, his first season in the Premier League, he's already achieved the highest ever finish, joint highest ever finish that you've seen in 60 years. That is phenomenal. And you're right, Martin, we wax lyrical about him all the time. And in a few months when Rob's saying he's bored again and he wants to write about something, I wouldn't be surprised if it's the old Regis Le Bris biography or something like that. Maybe wait till we've won the Europa League, but that can be the next project.
Have to have a few work trips to France for that one, Rob.
Yeah, well, you never know. Who knows? From my point of view, I'd love to think Regis Le Bris will continue to be Sunderland's manager for a long time to come. But we know what football's like. Football changes. If he loses 7 games in a row, there'll be people wanting him out. If he wins 7 games in a row, there'll be people wanting to acquire him for whichever club needs a manager. You can lose them at both ends of the scale, as it were. I just hope that Regis Le Bris stays at Sunderland for a long time. If he does, it means we're doing well.
Well, hopefully he's got his permanent door sign if Roy Keane didn't get it.
I certainly hope so, yeah.
Hopefully he has. Yeah. Excellent, Rob. Thank you so much for joining us today. Can you just let people know how they can get hold of your book?
Yeah, so it's called The Gaffers. It's I stress it's a small book. It's 120 pages. It's an at-a-glance guide to every manager. It costs £12, and it's going to be in the club. I don't think it's in the shops just yet. It's been out a few days, but it takes a little while to get into the shops. It's going to be in the club shop. It's going to be in Waterstones. It's It's going to be in, as they say, all good bookshops. And I believe if you just Google the Gaffers, I think the website from the publisher is called the Footy Hut, something like that. But it shouldn't be too difficult to get, and it should certainly be on the shelves in the club shop when you get there for the first games of the season.
Brilliant. Andrew, I think you'd heartily recommend getting, even though you've got a little bit of interest, personal interest in it, but I'm sure you'd heartily recommend everyone grabs a copy of it, wouldn't you?
Oh, definitely. It sounds like a pre-prepared advert, but it's one of those books where, like Kelvin, you mentioned Kelvin earlier. Kelvin's a huge Sunderland fan. He supported the club all of his life. He's going to enjoy that book. But somebody who's only just started supporting Sunderland, somebody who's still young and to whom qualifying for Europe seems perfectly plausible and perfectly normal, the ones who haven't been weighted down by the years of supporting the team, you could pick that up and very easily, very quickly learn about some important people in our history. And Rob, I think you said there that the Footy Hut website, I think there's a couple of other Sunderland books on there as well that you've done. Like, I think, is the Absolute Record on there, perhaps?
It is, yeah.
It's worth digging out. Yeah.
Very good. I've just had a look here while we are talking, and yes, you can get a whole load of websites, including Amazon. You get from the Love Supreme store as well. It's on there, so it'll be in plenty of places to get your hands on. But yes, please do go and search that out and grab yourselves a copy. But with that, we'll wrap up for today. So thank you again, Rob. It's been a great pleasure to have you on the podcast.
It's much nice to speak to you all, and this will not be the last time I speak to you before the start of the season. So let's hope we have a great season. We enjoy a European tour, and see you all in Frankfurt at the end of May for the final.
Well, yes, we'll make a date for that, definitely, without a doubt. And thank you, Andrew.
Cheers. Pleasure catching up with you both.
Excellent. We will be back tomorrow on Haway The Podcast. I'm not too sure what we've got lined up for you yet, but there will be something absolutely superb. But until then, it's goodbye from us.
Stitch Fix. Stop shopping. Get styled.
Not today, sweatpants. Somebody's wearing jeans that fit.
Wow! No photos, please. I'm just a regular dad who happens to have a stylist.
I really look my best when someone else makes the decisions.
Hey, we can all see you two-way mirrors.
Just share your size, style, and budget, and your stylist sends personalized looks right to your door. Stitch Fix. Get started today at stitchfix.com.
I want to hug you. I'm going to hug you. I'm coming in for a hug.
Sports Social Podcast Network, the biggest voices in sport. Let's take a look at some of the lineup. Fantasy Football Scout.
I've got a triple up on Arsenal. I've also got a triple up on Manchester City.
The Chronicles of a Gooner.
I've been really impressed with Morgan Rogers this season. I think he deserves the elevated status within the England camp.
The Wild Ones Cycling Podcast.
Cycling can reduce anxiety and depression and sharpen cognitive function.
All on Europe's biggest sport podcast network. Find your next favourite sport podcast. Search Sports Social Podcast Network and listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Verified comparison at content.sport-social.co.uk/comparison.